Now let's get straight into the second video. So the method, so sometimes medication needs to be taken in a particular way. It depends on what the client's requirements are and what the considerations the doctor or the specialist has written up for the client. So we have to always check that before we give the medication. So an example is a client with dysphagia who is unable to swallow tablets whole. They might have an eating and drinking plan. They might be in place by a speech pathologist or a dietitian, and they may need alternatives such as liquid medication, or the medications may need to be crushed, cut, or split. And there are some oral medications that, regardless of what the orders might say, they cannot be crushed or opened, and those are modified release medications. Those are medications that are absorbed in the body further down past the stomach, so the intestines. Enteric-coated medicines, which are also known as film or sugar-coated medicines. Nurofen, which is ibuprofen, is a good example of that. So that sugary coating that's on Nurofen is exactly what that's referring to. Okay, so it doesn't get absorbed in the stomach, but rather the upper intestines. So there should be no altering of any medication in any way, shape, or form if it's not written up. So don't take it upon yourself to do this. Don't dissolve it, mix it with food, hide it, or crush it. All of this goes against your duty of care and goes against best practice, unless of course it is written up either in the care plan by the specialist or on the front of the medication chart by the GP. You can also find this information on the MAS, but be careful because not always is everything going to be on the MAS. So do just check it out. And again, I just want to really stress this point. Don't ever take it upon yourselves to do this. Don't think, I think my client is struggling to swallow, I'm just going to crush their medication. If you do notice your client is struggling to swallow, report it. Get a GP appointment booked. Get the GP to review it. It might end up leading to specialist appointments and a diagnosis, which could ultimately help improve the quality of life of your client, as well as leading forward, it could prevent all kinds of alterations, including choking. So we've got to be so careful with these things. It's not up to us to take that kind of responsibility on ourselves, though. So the right to refuse. It's not considered one of the 8 rights of medication administration, but it should always be on the top of your mind. And at any point, a client can refuse medication. All right, so that you could be putting it in their hands and they could say no, and that is well within their rights to do that. They don't have to take the medication if they don't choose to, unless of course restrictive orders are in place, and then there'll be specific steps that you need to take in order to achieve those goals. Okay, so we never force it on a client, and we can work around this refusal. Okay, so I want you to take a moment now and think about how you could navigate around refusal. So let's assume that I'm your client, okay, and you've gone, hey Adam, it's time for your medication now, and I've gone, no, I don't want it. What do you do? So take a moment, pause it, and we'll go over some of those answers in the next slide. Okay, so hopefully you all had a bit of a chance to think about what you would do if your client did refuse. But first off the bat, and what is probably very interesting is it's not always everyone's first thought, but we need to ask them. So why are they refusing? It could be that they need to go to the bathroom, they've got specific routines they like to meet before they have their medication. They might want to have their breakfast and shower first before medicine. There's so many things. They want to wait for an ad break in their favorite TV show. We just don't know unless we ask, okay? So we need to ask these questions. Explaining to the person why the medication is important is also a really good one to know. So clients don't always have complete understanding of what the medication is that they're taking. So if we talk to them about it, explain what an anticonvulsant does, and talk about whether they like or dislike having convulsions or seizures, we might be able to logically explain and talk to our clients into recognizing the importance of having their medication. So it's not coercion, we're not trying to trick them or anything here, we're just explaining. We might go, do you enjoy having seizures? Like if you don't take this medication, you're likely to have more seizures. Do you like that? Most of the time they'll say no, and they'll understand that it's important that they have their medication. The no might have been coming from somewhere else, right? They're fed up with it. They might be sick of taking medication 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. Okay, so the feelings are valid and need to be responded to appropriately, but we can talk to them and we can work with this refusal. Trying again after a short period of time, recognizing that they're busy, recognizing that right now might not be the best time to approach them. Try again in 5 or 10 minutes. Now, if you are working on a site that has 2 or more support staff, try to get another support worker to approach the client. It doesn't have to be you. So obviously the senior on shift, if that is designated to be you that day, is the person that's responsible for giving the medication. But for whatever reason, if your client hates you that day, they really dislike you, they're upset at you, you woke them up from a nap and they were having a really good dream and they're upset at you for ruining that. Maybe they're not going to listen to you. Maybe they're not going to do anything for you because they're upset, and that is fine. If we can find another person that has the assist with medication training, great. Let's see if they can approach the client. It might just be you today that they don't want to talk to. Should go without saying, but we never use anger, we never use threats, we never use violence, okay? Those 3 are probably the easiest to note, right? Like it's obvious when someone's angry or threatening, or even, using violence to try to force a medication down someone's throat, perhaps. But coercion's the one that's a little bit trickier. So coercion is, for example, if we have a client that they need to take their medication and they're refusing, and we go, well, come on now, if you don't take your medication, we're not going to go to the park anymore. That's coercion. You're taking something away if they don't do something for you. Okay, the other side of it is the positive. So come on, if you take your medication, I'll give you a chocolate bar. All right, so both of these are belittling, controlling, and they are coercion. Okay, so please don't do this. This is illegal. You cannot coerce someone. That is not an informed consent when they do consent to it ultimately, because they're doing it because of the outcome. So either something's being taken away from them or they're gaining something for doing it. Okay, so it is coercion. Put yourself in their situation. Let's assume you're in hospital. And you go to your client, you go to the nurse. The nurse comes to you and gives you some medicine in a cup, and the nurse just says, "Yeah, take this." You go, "Oh, what is it?" The nurse goes, "Oh, yeah, I don't really know, but if you take it, I'm going to give you $1,000. I've got it right here. You can see it. You can touch it. If you take this medicine, I'll give you $1,000." It's super dodgy. Okay, whether or not you take the money in that scenario is not the point. It's just to illustrate the danger of coercion. Okay, so please don't do it. And regardless of if you have children or you work with children, you might often hear coercion used quite commonly. If you don't eat your dinner, you won't get dessert, that kind of thing. It just doesn't fly. We do not do that with clients. Okay, I can't stress that enough. And we have to refuse all the refusals. Sorry, we have to report all the refusals. And what that means is you're obviously writing a MIR, as well as writing in the med chart where you'd normally sign, you'd write a little R and circle that. And that tells everyone else that that medication that time was refused. We can also call the pharmacist or Poisons Line to check what kind of outcome we'd expect from a client refusing that medication. So adverse reactions and side effects can happen to everyone and anyone, regardless of the medication. It can happen, okay? So they can be mild, they can be serious, they can also be positive, which a lot of people don't often think about. So a positive side effect comes again from the example of ibuprofen, or what people often know as the trade name is Nurofen. So if a person is menstruating or they're having a period, if a person takes ibuprofen the day before and all the way through during their menstrual cycle, what can occur is obviously a decrease in cramps, which is why people often take it, but it also decreases blood loss by up to 33%. So the positive here from a side effect is that it decreases blood loss as well as increases iron retention. So some people that menstruate have a difficulty in retaining iron in their body. So this is one way that people can prevent that iron loss, which is a really good side effect if you ask anyone that has to take iron supplements. So what I want you to do now is just off the top of your head, think of some of those side effects that you might know that aren't so positive. So we're thinking like vomiting, diarrhea, nausea. Can you think of anything else? So again, take a brief moment here, pause the video, think of some things, and then you can move on to the next slide. After, of course, you think of this, knowing what the side effects are. Okay, so what do you do? If a client is having a side effect, how would you know that? All right, so quite obviously, you might be observing them. They could come up to you, talk to you, tell you, I've got a headache now. I didn't have that before I had this medicine. Okay, so we're going to document that. We're going to work through that together, okay? So yep, absolutely. For the moment, do think of some of those side effects. Okay, so hopefully you've had a think. You've come up with a few, and they can be anything, okay? All the way from a runny nose, headache, depression, diarrhea. Okay, there's a whole array of side effects that could happen as a result of a client taking medication. So what we do is we report it, we fill out a MIA, we call POISNS or the NPS Adverse Medicines event line, and follow their advice. Okay, simply put, if you are uncertain or you don't know and you're looking at your client and you're going, this is not normal behavior, this is not a normal side effect, I've not seen this before with my client, and you're worried, we would much rather you call emergency services and get an ambulance to you instead of, oh, I'm not sure, I might wait for it, okay, and then be wrong. That would be the worst outcome. So calling them isn't going to be the worst thing. Plus you can call them, tell them all the information you've got, and they might still go, maybe this isn't as serious as you think it is, maybe we don't need to come out to the site. Okay, so simply calling them is much better than not calling them if you're ever uncertain. And again, at the very end of it all, hopefully you're going to fill out a MIA with as much detail as you can, and that report will be filtered up to your CSC. There are some information on the numbers that you could call. Don't stress too hard about this. This should be available on site above every telephone, okay, but with extra specific information. So the actual pharmacist that's used information, same with the general practitioner. The consumer medicines information is online. I've got a link there in the description under the theory training, but you can also access it hopefully in the folder within the medication chart there as well on site. So there's lots of places to find this information. So if you're ever uncertain, obviously, call your CSC to find where that information is if you can't find it yourself. So other things that we have to think about, allergies. Is our client allergic to the medication or an ingredient in the medication? What does that allergy look like? Is it, itchiness, or is it anaphylaxis? Are they potentially going to die if they have this medication? And it's not just medications, it's food as well as other things like dust and dog hair too. So just be super careful. Allergies may not be written on the chart if they're unknown. So if no one knows that this client is allergic to something and they get introduced to something for the first time and they have an allergic response, we need to be diligent and observing for that, and of course acting appropriately. Check for warning labels. Do not operate heavy machinery. Do not stop this medication abruptly. These are really common medication warnings that you might see. Check for expiry dates. Every medication has an expiry date. If you don't check for that and you're providing medication that has expired, you're acting outside of your duty of care. So this is something that needs to be checked as well. And is there a medication data sheet? Okay, so does your client need monitoring at all for any of the medications they're on? If they do, let's say they need their heart rate taken before and after the medication, that might be an additional sheet that you'd have that you would fill that information in. Okay, so quick questions. This usually works a whole lot better in person, but I'll give you guys some time to think of each question before I go to the answer. So I want you to think about who gives the medication at CLO. Yep, so hopefully we're seeing you guys say the senior on shift. Otherwise, what I like to also see is anyone with the assist with medication qualification there too. So who can give medication that the client has purchased, but it isn't on the medication chart? So the client is the only person that can do that. Until it is written up by the GP on the medication chart, no one else can give it. The client can self-administer, but no one else. And this last question, what happens if a client new to you is due medication and the senior support worker with you tells you to crush it because that's the way the client likes it, but it's not documented anywhere that you can do it? What do you think you do? Now, hopefully everyone's refused, but in addition to that, talk to the person, talk to the other support worker and get more information. Like, okay, so how long has this been going on for? Why did we decide to do this all of a sudden? Is it just you? Is it everyone else that does it? Is the order written somewhere that we can't find it right now? It might be that we, have misread something and they were right, but ultimately if they're doing something and it's not written to be done, they're breaching that safety, they're breaching that duty of care to their client, and you do need to report that. Okay, so it is a mere form, and I would also be probably having a conversation with the CSC, just letting them know what information you've found out. All that will lead to is a conversation with the other support worker and possibly education. Okay, we're not all about telling off people here. We want what's best for our client, and if our client is having the medication crushed just because they want it, there's no real evidence to support that. But if there is evidence, like the client struggles to swallow tablets, for example, they need to be referred to the GP and have specialist appointments booked in to have that reviewed properly. We can't just be making those decisions for ourselves. Okay, so some final points to note about PRNs, just to really jog your memory. It needs to be clearly documented by the GP or the medical practitioner. No one else can document in the PRNs. Always check when the last dose was given. So if you've got paracetamol on the PRN list, for example, there should be no reason, absolutely no reason that you're not checking to see, was this given 4 to 6 hours ago? If it was given 2 hours ago, we can't give it, even if the client's requesting it, okay? You need to give it as they're required, and there is no obligation that you are giving it even if the client doesn't request it, okay? So it's not a regular medication, it's only whenever they need it. You document it just like any other medication once you've given it, and you follow our policies on PRN medications, which can be found in the medication policy. And there is often a separate Webster pack for PRN medications. It doesn't always look the same. So the regular medications are often blue, but you could see yellow, pink, green, black colored Webster packs, and that's just to show you the difference, to really visually make it obvious for yourselves. Okay, and PRNs, they could be anything, all right? So it's not always going to be medication. It can be lotions, moisturizers, and that's often what you'll find on your client's PRNs as well. Okay, so things that you wouldn't normally have medicated. So normally, a moisturizer wouldn't be on the medication chart, but we do have that on the medication chart, and that is just so we can safely administer it each time. Just be careful, be mindful of that. If it's not on the PRNs, you cannot give it, even if the client has it in their house. What might end up happening with moisturizers, for example, is that you might give it to them, so to give them the bottle, and they self-administer it. Okay, so that might be how it works. Just always double check, always make sure that you're doing the right thing there though. So do PRNs need to be recorded? I just said that. The answer is absolutely yes, it does. And who can authorize PRNs? I did just mention that. So only doctors can. And does extended use of PRNs, and you can't read that there, sorry, does that need to be reported? So if a client is using the PRNs as many times a day as they can every day, do we need to let someone know? Oh, the answer is yes, absolutely we do. We need to book a GP appointment and we need to have a conversation with them about our client's PRN use. It might be that they're misunderstanding what the PRN is. They might be taking it every day because it's painful, or they need it, or they want it, and we have to consider it going onto the regular medication chart. And of course vice versa, so the opposite can occur. If a client is on a regular medication and they're finding that they're not needing it as much, it can be moved to the PRN possibly too. So again, careful, be mindful, work with the other experts. So use the GP, have conversations with them, and work towards positive outcomes for your client. So let's cover some of those emergency responses that will follow. So how would you respond to the following situations? Your client loses consciousness. What do you do? We need to call an ambulance. Obviously, what I want you to always do is, just like first aid, you learnt the mnemonic doctors ABCD, so danger, response, send for help. You need to check for dangers first. You need to make sure that client's not responding, but then absolutely you are sending for help, you're calling an ambulance. If they're exhibiting dangerous or extremely dangerous behavior towards you, what do you do then? A lot of people often say they'll call the police, and that's absolutely correct. You will call the police, but before that, you need to make sure that you're safe, okay? You need to back away from the situation if it's unsafe. The office is lockable, so you can lock yourself in the office, keeping yourself safe to be able to call SAPOL, the mental health triage if that's a requirement of your client, but do follow their crisis plan if one is in place. If they're experiencing unusual, unexpected, or extended seizure activity, now hopefully you remember this also from first aid, but what we'll do is we'll obviously call an ambulance. If it's unexpected and they've never had seizures before, we'll do that straight away. Otherwise, they might have a seizure management plan or a crisis management plan, and we will obviously follow those. But if after 5 minutes the seizure continues after the plan has been implemented, we're calling the ambulance. And if you're ever uncertain, ambulance is the best answer too. So you or someone wrongfully administers the medication. So maybe you're working in a house with multiple clients and you've accidentally given the wrong client's medication to the wrong person. What do you do then? Yeah, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to call poisons. Okay, so we'll call poisons unless, of course, they're responding negatively to the medication immediately, then we'll call an ambulance. Okay, I know it says there to call the GP, pharmacy, or hospital, but we're not going to call the GP. The hospital won't answer that call. It's just not a priority for them. Okay, so call an ambulance, call poisons first if you can. Okay, it can be fatal to clients if they've never had medication before, and it can interact with various symptoms that they've got, or diagnoses that they have, or other medication that they're possibly on. So do be careful with these things. If you miss a medication, what do you do? So yep, hopefully everyone has responded that either you would call the pharmacist to just make sure that you can give that medication still. But if it is within that hour, so let's say it was due at 10 o'clock and you noticed at 10:50 and you gave it by 11, hopefully you know that you can just give that. There needs to be no one that you need to call, okay? So we just want to clear that up, make sure that you know that if a medication is missed, you're giving it. And finally, an NDIS reportable incident. So something major happens, your client goes missing for a few days, you're in an inactive overnight, and your client, you wake up in the morning and your client has deceased. You obviously will call an ambulance, you'll make all of the appropriate calls and follow the appropriate plans, but your CSC and RM will put in that incident report. That's not something that you'll have to do. Okay, so I'd like to thank everyone for watching these videos. I know it's been a lot. Feel free to watch these as many times as you need to ensure that you get all the information that you can take into that theoretical. So there will be a final little slideshow that I'll provide you with to give you all the information that you need before the theoretical quiz. Just those really important nuggets of information that you might want to remember going into it. Okay, so good luck with the theory, and again, if you do need to watch these videos again, and do provide feedback. If you want to know things that weren't in the videos, or you want things clarified, please tell me. There is a discussion board that you can ask these questions in or make these comments in. So I encourage you strongly to do that. And I really look forward to seeing you guys in the practical. So good luck with everything.